And I said, I feel like I'm in a bit of a fog. I also know that's a good thing for me.
Yes.
Yeah. Because, you know, I tend to have a tendency that I do like a bit of clarity, and so fog's good. And then it's like, oh, but Julie, you actually have to think about what you're going to do the next 2 days. How you're going to tie all this together. Because again, it's exactly the same process as if I was in ATM or FI, you know, all of this has been going on. How do you try and pull it together? What do you think's more important? What made more sense? But I was going to start this morning just to see if anyone's got any questions or comments, because I haven't really given you time for that. That's a good question. In terms of... have you finished your ATM practicums? You finished them in terms of that I can happily say, you know, that you all, obviously Karen hasn't done hers yet and Bruce hasn't done hers and I think Jane's still, but the rest of you, congratulations. Where's Jen? You'll be getting something. You'll be getting something. In terms of, you know, because I think Joel sort of said this a little bit yesterday. He started to say, are we going to do it again? I think it's just so wonderful to see how much you all progress. It's timing. Because the thing is, I don't want to leave out as we go on how important ATM teaching is to your process of becoming a teacher of FI as well. Even though I sit here and go, all I do is FI, basically, in my practice. But I really understand ATM. So what I would suggest is if you find it incredibly valuable to get feedback, you know, from the people around you and to teach to your colleagues, how could you set it up that you could do it? You know? There's plenty of time in the morning if one of you each day wants to teach an ATM, you know, that you just go, oh, I might get a few people together and teach a bit of ATM and get a bit of feedback from my colleagues about how I do that. Any other? Or are you in this state that I'm in where it's difficult to articulate? Simon.
In going out into the world, teaching ATM, are we going to be told how to frame that and what tools to use, what imagery we can use, how to use the trademarks, all that stuff?
I saw Jenny just come down the stairs. Oh. In terms of the trademarks and everything, we will definitely talk about that. In terms of imagery and ideas, you've got a whole group of colleagues here to talk about that with. One of the things I've really learnt from trainings is that the more you use each other as resources and realise how, you know, one of the things I hope you really gathered from being in a room and listening to all of your peers teach was how many different ways you can teach ATM and how it's you teaching the ATM. You're not trying to, you know, be Moshe, you're not trying to be me or Lisa, but you finding your way, your passion, your thing. So if you're interested in stories or how that does, have you been in a lesson where you think someone did it well? go to them. Huh? Go to them and ask, how did you do that? How did you come up with that story? How did you come up with that metaphor? Or if you noticed when someone was teaching how they use their voice, go and have a conversation with them about that. Because the thing is, they may not even be aware of how well they use their voice or what they're doing. But really learn from each other. I'd really, really encourage you to really pick out, gee, what did I think they did really well that I could learn from?
Where the question's coming from more is just around prescriptions around just the legalities and the prescriptions around how we need to frame it within the context of this global Feldenkrais kind of situation.
I'll ask Jenny to talk to you about that. It's to do with all the guild stuff. Yeah. Any other questions? Anything about yesterday in the afternoon? I really loaded you with some ideas there.
I was amazed about this holding up with the muscles. If you let them go. What it does to your body, how easy it is to be on all fours, things like that.
So again, that's a really powerful example of how an image or an idea can really change something. You know? And that's what we're getting to all the time, this idea that we can match sensation with a cognitive understanding of what we're doing. So it's that difference between, if the concept is still too abstract, so I'm thinking it in my head and then applying it to my movement because I'm thinking about it, or if I'm thinking and I'm sensing as I'm doing it, that the thinking is absolutely going into the sensation. And for some of you, that will already mean something. And for some of you, that'll be like, I've got no idea what Julie's talking about. No? Damn.
Just asking from a therapist point of view, with people with ABI or stroke where there's loss of spasticity, have you thought, is it more the, I've been trying to think about it now, is it more the bigger muscles or is it actually more the smaller muscles? I've never differentiated and I have been thinking about it. And
because that's what you're going. Is that a useful concept at all times to think about? Is it a useful concept to think about? You know, something is going on in their nervous system, something really profound, where all the muscles are adapting differently, but it's generally, I don't want to spend too much time on this. How would I say? Generally, again, you're trying to find their skeleton. You're trying to find how to make it easier for them to support themselves. And again, you don't want to get in the way. So when I've worked with children, I think the easiest thing is to help them to reduce their spasticity. I actually don't think that's that difficult, as soon as I include all of them in the movement. If I can get these directions of force going through them. So for example, a little child I had who was very, very, not hemiplegic, but all over, just getting mum and dad to rock up and down. Lying, just oscillate. Just a simple, gentle oscillation, up, down, up, down. Amazing the difference it made, because it was all 4 bits. So if you had a hemiplegic someone with hemiplegia, which is more one side for those of you who aren't aware, what would be the plane of movement that you might use? Side bending, you know, you might be doing something inside lying to get it. But there's something about getting the movement through. So whenever I'm working with anyone, especially someone with a neurological disorder, I'm trying to feed normal sensation into their system. Really trying to give them a sense. So can you imagine if you're all sitting there and just put a lot of tone into one side? No? So we'll be a hemiplegic for a moment. No? How would you try, does the weight stay on that side or does it shift to the opposite side? And you can do either. Yeah? You can come onto one side, but a lot of them will shift to the opposite side. Yeah? So you've shifted to the opposite side to get all this. So how are you going to bring the weight back onto the other side if they've got all this? Or do you go to the easier side more? You keep shifting to the easier side and find that because really, if the weight's off it, you've got more opportunity to get those big global muscles to turn on. But so that's why you've got to really, so we say we're going to work with the good side, but what we're doing is going, can we go where it's already easy to go? Can that be an opportunity for this person to begin to feel that some more possibilities? Again, it's a thing we use all the time. All these ideas, weight shift direction, you know, planes of possibilities, planes of movement.
Just that the idea of big muscles and small muscles is an artificial division, just like the idea of my bones or my body or my mind. These are artificial divisions. They don't exist.
They're abstract.
And they're abstract. So the more that you work with a concrete whole person, the more chance you have of finding which bit to do next.
And the thing is, you know, when do you introduce these concepts? You know, I'm not going to introduce them until I think you've already got a sense of something. Huh? So we're always looking for, and I said this in my group yesterday, and Di picked it up in the ATM book that I'd never seen. You know, the first one is understanding by doing is part one, and part two is doing by understand, doing to understand. So you're always working within that. You know, you don't want a concept or an idea to get in the way of the sensory experience. You don't want that thinking to go into thinking, but you're always sensing as you're thinking. You're understanding it in yourself. So there's no point talking about a lot of those things I did yesterday to beginners, unless they're highly skilled athletes or highly skilled people where I know that might make a real difference to helping them to sort for what Feldenkrais is about. And that's the language. That's a little bit what you're talking about. How do I develop a language that really brings to those people what the way they maybe see the world, their mind maps, their schema, their way of interpreting the world.
I was just going to ask the opposite to Martina's question. So when you've got someone that doesn't have high spasticity in their low tone, the relationship between those big muscles and little muscles. So are you then activating the little muscles? So what's low tone? To wake.
How many of you can go low tone? Some of you can't even go low tone.
So are you then activating the small muscles to awaken the big muscles in that case?
You're always trying to find the skeleton.
Yeah. With the, and that in that
because
case,
if I'm really low tone, if I'm really here and I want to get up, I'm going to have to try and use my big muscles. huh? Because I haven't got all of those movements in there. So that's what you're constantly trying to do. How do I find all of these different positions? You know, why does Feldenkrais, with so many of the kids he works with, he doesn't lie them on the table? Some of them he does, but many of them he's in standing. He's over there. They're over his knee. They're in standing, shifting weight there. You know, so he's trying to evoke. I really want you to understand how powerful it is, this idea of using different points and shifting weight and finding how to get something free. Because, you know, I was just saying to Di this morning, you all can stand on one leg. You can get to one point. So you've learnt it there, but could you stand on one hand? But you can see it's the same, but you haven't generalised the organisation through you. Huh? You haven't generalised that anti-gravity response that I can evoke that through any part of myself. I can evoke it through my head. So all of a sudden we put you in unusual, a novel, a different situation where automatically you're going to be a bit more anxious. Yeah, you're going to be a little bit more disoriented. And because think, how many points have we given you there to feel safe? And how are you gradually going to feel that instead of my legs always being the bit that I'm organising, how can my hands find this ability to organise in this anti-gravity response? How does my head find the ability to get this anti-gravity response? Because then it's generalised. Yeah? Then I understand it because every part of me knows how to evoke it. If you think back, remember at the end of the last segment, and we did all of that pushing when someone was lying, and you were gently pressing the iron ball, and you were pressing the heel and up the leg. Can you remember, Carol? They were on their tummy, and you've done the lesson of rolling the iron ball along the back of you. Yeah, and then we did that on each other, and we did that gentle press lift, and that you got up and you went, oh my God. That's evoking, and I'm sure I said it, that's evoking the anti-gravity response. But it's evoking it through all of these different parts of yourself that you're not used to evoking it through. Yeah? But as a baby, that's how they learn to get up, by getting this press lift, 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 which is what the lesson that Lisa did the other day and we'll be doing more of today. That's a generalised concept that we're putting into many, 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 many ATMs. And the more you can understand and experience in yourself that, oh, he's just doing the same thing again. This is just another way to feel some of these ideas that help us to become more organised. And we're just doing them in many, many different orientations. I'll just go to Glenn first.
Yeah, you just kind of, in a sense, in part answered my question. Because when we ask these questions, sometimes I feel like I do with some of my kids coming back to me and I say, when you're doing a push-up, it's the same as doing a chin-up, it's the same as doing a press against the wall. They come back and go, I teach them a structure to use for them to hold themselves in these positions. And then I say, you just spread out from here. And then they come back and go, well, how do I do a handstand? Or how do I do a pull-up? Remember when I showed you how to stand and just do that? And sometimes when I'm asking a question, I feel like you're going to say, just do that. Because that's what we're doing, like this thing over and over again. But you kind of gave me an idea then. But when you're doing this with someone with extreme pain, I mean body pain, would you be thinking of that same thing, like pushing through or just trying to get a sense of...
Most people who have got pain, emotional, physical, anxiety, you want to give them their skeleton. The more you can give them And not only give them their skeleton, but just that they can, what we're going to do today, carrying on from this, is incredibly powerful.
I just thought that pressing thing.
Or the pressing,
might be
you still, because it's still giving them anti-gravity. It's still giving them this responsiveness.
the same thing.
Yeah. And that's, you know, that you can begin to, just a little bit, you know, what's that got to do with that? It's got to do with that. And, you know, where you own it is when you make the connection. When you get up and go, oh my God, I think I remember something that Moshe said. I remember something Julie said that is starting to have meaning for me. That it's another level of understanding that I've got. It's another approximation along this journey. But it takes practice. Intuition, like, you know, those things only come out of experience. They won't appear cognitively. Just because you think it enough. Damn it. But it's that same thing, you know, if you get up after an FI and you go, oh my God, I've got ribs. Wow. And you've been in line to get it, say, for example, you know, and you've been whatever, and you just go, wow. Wow. That has to be tied into many functions. Because if I go, is Joel here? Joel, could you tell your little story about the weight, please, at the gym? Yeah.
So I was doing weights at the gym and realized after we coloured in or looked at the people who'd coloured in their things, that I always, because of my Pilates and the shoulders down thing, I actually lifted from the weight as though my shoulders began here, at like my mid ribs. And so as soon as I put my shoulders on top of my ribs and lifted the weight, I was like, oh, it's so much lighter. Because I focused on where the joint is, not where the work can be. To hold my shoulders down or to lift the weight. And then there was the arm bending, and I focused on the elbow being what bent, not the bicep.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh.
He's including more in his image.
So much easier now because I'm focused on. So if I think about the weight being lifted from here and then supported from here, then it's a lot like tougher to lift than if I just go, okay, this bends, then that moves. It's like, oh, yeah.
Oh, and what would happen if he then thought, oh, it's my pelvis that's really... But what about your story? I think you told Di about when you were lifting really well and then you thought you just put heavier weights on.
Oh, is that when I did it wrong?
You didn't do it wrong. That's the thing. But
sorry?
You didn't do it, but just so you were doing it really well.
And heavier weights. Yeah. So I did heavier weights and I was like, oh, well, I was doing heavier weights.
What did he do?
But I suddenly went, I don't think I can do this. I want to get to 12 though, so I'm just going to do it. And I'm like, oh yeah, I made it, but I could feel like my arm going away from my body, basically, like my arm not being part of me, my ribs. And then I was like, okay, I did it. That's fine. It's fine. And then all yesterday I was like, I can't release my leg. So anyway, at least after your FI, I knew that was my pattern that I usually have. So I've been working on getting that back.
But you can see how quickly, if there's too much load, if it's too much challenge, where do we go? Back to our habit. And then we've got to work out again how to
because it went back
get
into
out of
a
our
pattern
habit
that I normally have. And I'm like, oh.
Because he lost what he'd found about this anti-gravity response, what he'd found, if I wanted. And all of a sudden he went into, no, it's too heavy.
Yeah.
I have to go back into my
I have to
pattern.
lift it instead of letting it go up. Yeah.
Yeah? So that's what you're constantly doing. So, if, you know, I go back to this bit about your ribs. You have to understand it in many orientations. Because I might have got this, but if the lesson didn't include maybe pushing through the arm, because that's another lesson, maybe very quickly if I go and pick up a load, I'm back in my pattern again.
So how do you make that?
You do it in more positions, in more orientations, so that, you know, if I've got this feeling, how do I then get it when I'm on my hands and knees? Can I still, no, I can't find it there. How do I, you know, can I get it when I'm lying on my tummy? Do I still have a sense of that? Do I get it when I'm lying on my side? Because you've got to take it into more and more and more orientations. If I wasn't weight bearing, how do I find it in weight bearing?
But you tend to want to do the same ATM on the ones and then
Absolutely, because you're, and you know, you can do the same ATM. It's a brilliant thing, because if you're doing the same ATM, you can refine details. You know, it's a little bit like the ATM that we did the other day when we'd already gone to the head sort of, and then we really pulled back. And it was really about process, finding the detail within, right from the beginning. What happens right from the beginning? What am I leaving out of my image? What isn't there? So that's really valuable to do the one movement and two, but that won't necessarily transfer the learning to another task. This has been the biggest thing that they learned, you know, from physio. That will strengthen this muscle in this context. Yeah, definitely if there's a little bit more strength there, it will make a difference. But you know, if that's, I'm just thinking I've got to get my muscle stronger, muscle stronger, muscle stronger. And you know, hopefully what you get, because you know, I will get people to do this, but in terms of what happens through all of them as they do that. Where does your hip go? Can you feel your foot comes up? What happens in your pelvis? What happens in your chest? Does your weight go to this side? Does your weight go to that side? How many different ways can you lift your leg and let your pelvis be free? That's a totally different way of doing that than just doing the same thing over and over and over again. It's a little bit like this he's one of my favourite little clients. I feel like Joel, my favourite little clients. And he's got a hemiplegia, and he wears a stimulator on this muscle to help him lift it through when he's walking. It's wonderful. It just makes his walking so much easier. And, you know, it's really interesting because all the muscles have built up, but does it really change his function if he takes it off? Not a great deal. Not a great deal. But, you know, if we do it, and, you know, there's other things that I think are more important for him, but, you know, we play sometimes with having it on and turning this way as he does it, or turning this way as he does it, or, you know, taking a step back as he does it, or because there I'm embedding it in a much bigger pattern. He does the same thing. He goes on the machine, what's it called? Anyone who's a... No. It's purely, this is with his hemiplegic arm, and the machine basically takes his arm forward and backwards. And you sit on it for half an hour at a time or something. Yeah? But again, what I've asked him to do is turn to the right when you do it, turn to the left when you do it, look down when you do it, look, you know, and just made it into how many different places can you see in the room while you're mindlessly otherwise sitting on this machine, having your arm taken forward and back. Yes. He's got quite a profound image. But, you know, what I'm looking for is how can this be a useful thing to do? And it doesn't mean all the time he's doing it, but just now, you know, where can you look? Where can you...
So there's another way of thinking that something like that machine or that stimulator is kind of like a constraint, so that it's keeping that in one way. I'm just trying to think of things like conversations with therapists at hospitals about AFOs or serial casts and, you know, all the pressure there is to use those things. And I'm trying to think, is there a positive way that you could use them, and could you think of them
Absolutely.
as a constraint? So, okay, yeah, let's
Absolutely.
put that on and lock that muscle in place, and maybe that will help you find everything. Is that a way to think
Absolutely.
of
You know, really work within it. An AFO is a splint you use to, again, help the foot come through. Yeah, to hold the
allegedly help
the foot. And again, that's where it gets you, because do you understand what helps my foot to live through? It's like I was giving a lesson yesterday, and it's like, well, think about if I'm going to do a model's walk, the foot just gets pulled through. I'm not doing anything too active really there. And they do that because they're on high heels and they've got to clear their foot through with this high heel on. No, that's their constraint, this incredible high heel. So their hip has to do, does that make sense? It has to do a lot more of the activity. Yeah? But how that probably, because that asks the foot to drop really, doing it that way, that isn't going to help the foot to come on. What would help the foot? That's what you're doing with all these lessons. What have you been doing that asks the foot to flex? It's that. If I'm getting a little bit longer there, it doesn't make sense to drop my foot. How to stand up, try it. So the model walk is more the extension. Can you feel if you want to get that, you're extending the low back, really, to pull it through? And you know, the ATM yesterday, I really worked with this walk because the person needed a lot more extension through their sacrum. It just wasn't there. So I was, what's the pattern that's going to really help them? And can you see, because she was having trouble sitting, that pattern's going to be easier to let her, to take her hips back in space and let her head come forward to bend. Huh? And then feel the difference if you sort of lengthen in your back. You still shift, but you lengthen in your back and bring your foot through. Does your foot just automatically start to dorsiflex a little bit? So these are the patterns that you're doing. But otherwise, if you extend your toes, it's not that easy. But you think of all the stroke clients you see. They extend. Extend to try and get their leg through, which is valuable for them to do because often they're not going to get that back necessarily. Yeah, and it makes sense. They're trying to get that leg that won't really move to come through. And that's where you've got to look at that. That's a smart nervous system. That's a really intelligent nervous system to do that. And then how do we come in and modify, but understanding what they'd need to understand to start to do it another way. Yeah? They need to understand maybe more reflection extension, the side bending and the, because you will usually not see, where I had seen it is, it was beautiful in a woman who had a hemiplegia who did the training in Canada, in Brisbane. And she actually so she was still really there, and there, and she actually got contralateral. It was just stunning through her walk, from doing the training.
Julie, quick question. The anti-gravity muscles, do they go right down into the pelvis?
Every single muscle has an anti-gravity component in it. It's just that the small muscles have a much larger component of the fibres that I would call tonic.
All joints? All joints actually have a smaller one?
It's not the joints, it's the muscles.
Yeah, but I mean connected to the joint. Back, it show it, but I haven't seen it. It's just part of the muscle.
Every muscle has tonic, which are the postural, and phasic, which are the movement. And they're very different muscle fibres. They're supplied by different parts of the brain. As I said, they use energy differently. Movement muscles fatigue very quickly, but they can do very sharp, quick bursts of activity. The tonic ones are just designed to do this long, not fatigue.
So there's
just keep going.
Slow twitch.
Slow twitch. Although, don't go into it too much, because then phasic can be slow twitch or fast twitch too. But it's just more getting the idea that if I'm using those great big muscles that cover big areas to hold, doesn't matter if they're moving a bit, as long as it's when they hold. It's when they hold. It's when they fix us that they're an issue. Absolutely. It's when we're over our base that it's easier to give up the big muscles. But we also need all that novelty. So much of these lessons are about you finding how all of these different parts of yourself. So the worm is about finding all the middle part of you, then all of these are about finding the extremities, and we're just moving one to the other, one to the other. How do we keep informing that they all inform each other? Okay, I think that's enough. Let's do an ATM.
Julie, when someone's lying, you're putting pressure, so that's an anti-gravity as well. So is that just a different orientation?
It's a different orientation to do it in, but it's a really safe orientation to do it in.
Those muscles then feeling that they can lift.
Yeah. Because remember when you got up after that lesson, see, that's what you're trying to do. You had the experience of the lesson. You as practitioners then at some stage need to generalise what is it out of all these lessons that I'm learning. And that's why you're in a process.